drugs. They couldn't get those products out of the manufacturing plants fast enough. It's a little bit different today. We may spend a little bit of time talking about that. And so because of that frustration, my decision was, if you can't beat them, join them, take what you've learned, and then try and do it a lot different. Do it right? And so while today is not about what we do directly, it is about getting transparency within the PBM space. And so there's my picture there on the top left, and some members of our team here. And the one thing you might notice on this particular slide here is that I'm the only one not smiling. Heavy is the crown, as they say. Heavy is the crown. And so listen, let's get into it. And the best part is going to be towards the end. I recommend you take notes. If you have questions, there's a couple ways you can get those questions to me. And the first one is you can send your questions via chat here, at which point when we have a break, I'll try and get to those questions and answer those questions live, but we'll have time at the end as well. And then if you want the floor, simply raise your hand. I will unmute you and let's have a conversation. If you agree or disagree with what I'm going to share with you today, share it. Let's have a conversation. That's the only way we're going to be able to learn. And so by the end of this presentation, 3 things. I want you to know how PBMs make money. I want you to feel something other than indifference, because what I do know, if I don't know anything else about this industry, what I know for a fact is for anything to change, you've got to have fire in your belly. Without that fire in your belly, we're going to continue to see and do what we've been doing for the past 2 decades, which is broken. And so once you feel something other than indifference, the thing I want you to do is to start to eliminate information asymmetry. There's a lot of talk about, getting bigger discounts and, and bigger rebate guarantees or not chasing rebates, and all those things are important. But that's not really the primary intent here of PBMs. PBMs want to withhold information from their clients. The reason that they want to withhold that information is because it makes it difficult to then determine how much money they are making. And so from a PBM's perspective, and I'm just telling you, I've had these conversations around the water cooler, you are less likely to be in an uproar, to be furious about how much money that they are driving for themselves when you don't know what it amounts to in the first place. That is why we talk about so much eliminating information asymmetry. This is a perfect example of that strategy at play. Not only is the broker in on this, but you can see that the PBM as well. Background story, this particular entity is a 30,000 life plan. And they entered into an agreement with the PBM that doesn't allow them to get their own data. That's information asymmetry. I had this same conversation last week with another potential client where I said that they were going to go out and get their claims data and we're going to analyze it for them. And I said, listen, you might have some trouble getting that information, and here's what we're going to do in case that happens. And they were like, it's our data. I'm not going to have any problems. Lo and behold, even with the Consolidated Appropriations Act, lo and behold, a few days later, you were right. We're having problems getting our own data because the PBMs don't want you to know how much money they're making, because when you find out, you're going to determine that it's not fair and do something different. This is an example of what information symmetry looks like, or information success. This is from a rebate perspective, and this is an insight. From a rebate perspective, whenever we pay rebates to a client, we also, in conjunction with that payment, provide a receipt. And that receipt is a remittance report. Now, some of this information for privacy and confidentiality reasons has been removed, but we provide this on a quarterly basis when those dollars come in, and it gives you NDC level data for each drug that was eligible for a rebate and what that particular drug earned in terms of its rebate. The significance of this now is you're able to determine and calculate net cost. Without this level of detail, the client is unable to calculate net cost. Isn't that the point? So the status quo: plan sponsor enters into an agreement, or a third-party payer enters into an agreement with a PBM. That agreement calls for an artificially too low administrative fee. When I say artificially too low, I'm suggesting that anything below $6 per paid claim, you could also factor it out on a PEPM or PMPM basis. At the end of the day, when you back it in, it's going to be somewhere around $6 per paid claim. Anything less than that is artificially too low, which means that the PBM is going to have to augment that artificially too low administrative fee to make a profit, to cover the overhead. Now, that administrative fee I was just referring to is from the pharmacy side. But also now what you have is, in some cases, the medical benefit side being brought into this strategy by saying, hey, 10,000 life group employer, you know what? If you forego your rebates on the pharmacy side, we'll cut your medical administrative fee in half. Or we'll give some sort of discount off of your medical administrative fee if you forego your rebates on the pharmacy side. It's the same game, different name. Is an artificially too low administrative fee that allows a PBM then to go in and start generating its management fee, its service fee, primarily through these three buckets here. These are the three big buckets. They aren't the only levers that a PBM has at its disposal, but these are the three primary buckets. And so you saw on that previous slide that almost 50% of PBM's profit is coming from where? The manufacturer. They'll say that's not true. I'm telling you, just as sure as you hear my voice here, it is in fact true. And we're going to talk about some of the I guess new strategies or tactics that they're employing to protect those hidden revenues here in a second. But this is a second slide that backs up that previous slide that I shared with you. And if you remember, I shared with you, I started out with the drug manufacturer right at this time, right when generics were starting to come on the scene, and there was all this concern about whether or not they were as efficacious as their branded reference products. Turns out they are. And by the way, as a side note, biosimilars for specialty drugs, they're here. And the same thing that happened with small molecule brand drugs, where we have now on average 90% of all claims are generic, we're going to start to see that effect with specialty drugs here. It's just going to take maybe 5-10 years before we get there. And then by that time, manufacturers will have, cell and gene therapies, taking over from the specialty drugs. So 2002, you had small molecule brand drug rebates driving PBM revenue. You got smart. And in the PBM industry, this strategy is referred to as ballooning. When one revenue source for a PBM is cut off, it moves that cost or that revenue to itself, cost to its clients, but revenue to itself, to a different source. So you got smart with small molecule brand drugs, or your clients got smart with small molecule brand drugs. Remember mandatory mail order that PBMs required of their plan participants, and then new laws, or any willing provider laws and things, and states got wind of it, and CMS got wind of it. And so now when that was cut off, PBMs then shifted that cost or revenue for themselves to specialty drug rebates. And if we move this out further here, now they have shifted that revenue even further. I just touched on it, from the pharmacy benefit, and moved a big chunk of it into the medical benefit. So if we move this out even further, now we have medical benefit drug claims, which is essentially the wild, wild west in terms of little oversight and monitoring and analyzing medical benefit drug claims. And any PBM today, whether they are a carve-in or a carved-out option, should be working with medical benefit drug claims. You don't have to be owned by a carrier to do that. And so I'm not here to bash PBMs. I believe we offer a very, very valuable service. But my concern, my frustration, my angst is over the hidden cash flows to non-fiduciary PBMs, which make up for those artificially too low PBM administrative fees that I talked about up front. Very important that you understand the PBM business model. And I'm going to take maybe 3 minutes to run through this. And let me say this before I forget. PBMs don't take control of the product. Unless that drug is flowing through a mail order pharmacy or a specialty pharmacy, or the PBM owns a chain, which they should be operating independent of one another, right? My company never takes control of the product. We outsource mail and specialty pharmacy. We never take control of the product. Why should we be making that much money? And when I say that, we're going to talk about that here in a second. And so let's start with the contractual relationship. PBMs contract with pharmacies in order to have sites from which prescriptions can be dispensed to its plan participants. And then we have to have clients to provide those services to. Those clients are our health plans, small, medium, large employers, unions, coalitions, municipalities, state and federal governments, if the PBM is large enough. Now, there is news out this week when I talk about contracting with pharmacies. There is some news out this week as GoodRx. Do a quick Google search, GoodRx, and a grocer. They had blocked GoodRx discounts through that. They didn't identify the grocer, but they had blocked prescriptions flowing through that large grocer, which had a major impact on GoodRx's financial. So we talk about, and by the way, GoodRx is not really a cash program. It's really an electronic program, claims adjudication disguised as a cash program, because they are running on the major PBMs pharmacy networks, right? So when I talk about contracting, that's what I'm referring to. So it's a very complicated process. Now, let's talk about the financial flow now. We reimburse or pay pharmacies for the prescriptions that they dispense to our plan participants, and then we will bill our clients for those same prescriptions. Not the same amount, but we will bill them for those same prescriptions. There's three problems here with this system, or let's call it a business model. First, the inflow of cash in the form of rebates from the manufacturer back to the third-party payer by way of the pharmacy benefit manager is too low. I just showed you a slide, 2 slides, which indicated that as much as 50% of the profit a PBM makes comes from the manufacturer. And let me be clear here. I'm not saying that the 50% that the profit that the PBM makes is the problem. It's only a problem when you believe it's a problem. What I'm suggesting is the problem is you don't know what that 50% amounts to. If you know and you say, okay, I'm good with that, then there's no problem. The second problem is the reimbursement. So here's number one, and here's number two. The reimbursement to the PBM from its client, you or your client, is too high. The reimbursement coming back from the PBM's client to the PBM is higher than what the PBM is reimbursing this pharmacy. We're going to talk about what that is here in a second. We're going to show you a real world example. Here's the third problem. And let's refer back to that screenshot that I shared with you from the Director of Compensation and Benefits of a 30,000 life group. When I suggested to him, you have a PBM literacy problem, he didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to believe it. Hey, listen, I get it. You're great at your job. You wouldn't be in the position that you're in if you weren't great at your job. But pharmacy benefits is a different animal. It is not something you can be good at doing it part-time. That's why PBMs have been printing money for 2 decades. They do it full-time. Their clients do it part-time. The third problem is that you and your clients sit at the very top of this entire system, which means the money is flowing down. Yet you know the least about how it works. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen when you have bad actors who are smarter than the folks who are cutting the checks? Overspend. Even worse, folks not getting medications that they need because they can't afford them, or because the PBM wants to run a copay maximization program or a copay accumulator program, which doesn't benefit the patient when the manufacturers are creating coupons and have patient assistance programs to get those drugs into the cabinets of folks who can't afford them. That's my problem. I talked about the second problem. the spread. And by the way, again, you'll hear some folks talk about AWP is bad. It's just, no, it's not bad if you know how to use it. It's not bad if you know how to use it. It's bad because PBMs manipulate it. But when you're literate, you can prevent the manipulation. So from the pharmacy bids, we refer to AWP as ain't what's paid. Generic drugs primarily have two different, we call them price benchmarks, right? You have price reporting services like First Data and First Data Bank and Medispan and Elsevier and then there are others. They report prices that are submitted to them by drug manufacturers. Generic drugs have two prices, the AWP and the maximum allowable cost. AWP is set by the manufacturer. The MAC price is set by, you guessed it, the PBM. Let's take a look here at levothyroxine. 100 microgram times 30. And stay with me here, because we got pretty much a full house here with us today. And there's someone listening right now who's saying, oh, my clients don't pay a spread, or my company doesn't pay a spread. The AWP price is let's call it $560. Remember, and levothyroxine is a generic drug. So your cost or your client's cost is ultimately going to be determined by either one, AWP minus a discount, right? Or if the drug is adjudicated based upon it being on the MAC list, again, PBMs, MAC lists are proprietary. The quantity of drugs on that list and what their prices are determined by us. There's no federal MAC list that mandates PBMs follow it. There's no state MAC list that mandates that PBMs follow it. More about that here in a second. So the AWP, and by the way, this is just an example. The prices here for these particular drugs aren't up to date. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You could go out, if you have access to the data, do your own similar analysis. The same thing would be true. I'm just showing and sharing with you how these spreads manifest. And so the AWP here is, let's call it 560. Now, let's say you're a great negotiator and you're highly literate around pharmacy benefits management, beyond the functional role of a pharmacy benefit management company. And let's say at the end of the year, effectively, the discount negotiated for generic drugs achieves 85%. So you're familiar with generic effective rate. So what I'm saying is that whether or not the drug was the price was based on AWP minus, MAC, usual and customary, or just the patient's co-payment covered, whatever it is, at the end of the year, or NADAC, whatever it is, at the end of the year, effectively, when you back it in as a discount off of AWP, you achieved 85%. That's a stretch for many groups. Because those minimum guarantees that you negotiate up front don't take into consideration the levers that PBMs actually pull. What you negotiate and think is an 85% could in fact be much lower than that. But 85% ain't bad if it's real. So 85% discount off of 560, let's call it 475 bucks. That leaves 85 bucks. Now, this is just, listen, folks, this gives me chills. This is just, it's real life. You, your clients, are paying for something and you don't even know what it cost. You know what you're billed, but you don't know what it cost. This particular product cost the pharmacy $4. That's what it costs to put the product on the shelf. When I say invoice cost here, I'm saying, what did it cost the pharmacy to put the product on the shelf? $4. All the while, plans are negotiated with people, 85% discount. Screw that. You want the 85% discount, and then you want any overages to flow back to you as well. And so 85, and so theoretically, the PBM could, with the price benchmark being AWP minus, the PBM could reimburse the pharmacy a 100% markup plus a $2 dispensing fee. Let's say the cash outlay for the PBM is now 10 bucks. That is a $75, you guessed it, spread. Now, this product could be on the PBM's MAC list, which is not a discount. It is the price. It reflects transactional cost. It reflects a transactional cost. So let's say that the MAC list price is 15 bucks. The PBM's cash outlay doesn't change. That now is a spread of $5. You have a problem, or your client has a problem. If you don't have access to the data that indicates exactly what the PBM is paying the pharmacy, that's why it takes fire in the belly to do something about this. This is public information. Stay with me. I got less than 10 minutes, and I'm going to fly through the rest. The best part is coming up. About 2 years ago, the state of Ohio decided it was going to pivot. It wasn't, and this isn't anecdotal, by the way. It decided it was going to pivot. You know, we're not going to just throw away the discounts that we negotiate with you for the cost of goods. And, you know, in states, they're negotiating based upon ASP, average sales, right? They're starting there. So they're beyond just AWP, right? They're starting at ASP and WAC. They're starting there. Look those up if you're not familiar with them. But they decided we're not gonna just throw away the discount guarantees that we've been negotiating with you. We're not gonna just throw away the rebate guarantees that we've negotiated with you. But we're going to add one additional metric to our evaluation of your performance or of your proposal. And that is, how much are we paying you? Now just think about this for a second. Fire in the belly says, I'm hiring you, Miss PBM, and I want you to do the very best job that you can negotiating with pharmacy chains and independent pharmacies, PSAOs, and also drug manufacturers. And when you're done with that, I want you to pass all of that savings back to us. And in exchange, we're going to pay you a fee for that service. That's what a radically transparent PBM does. That's what a fiduciary model PBM is required to do. But what's been happening instead is PBMs go to pharmacies, they go to manufacturers, play extreme hardball. That's why manufacturers don't like us. That's why pharmacies don't like us. Because we play hardball. We're bringing all these lives, and here's what we want to pay, and take it or leave it. And when a member shows up and you're not in network, then they walk out the door. Instead, what's been happening is we play hardball, and then we don't pass back all the savings we negotiated. That's where the PBM's management fee comes from. What you don't require it to pass back to you that we negotiate, it keeps. So what do you think happens when you don't get rebates, remittance forms back that detail the claim level payments that PBM receive for rebate eligible drugs? What do you think happens when you don't know what the PBM has reimbursed the pharmacy and you don't have access to that data either? If you don't have fire in the belly, you don't care. This is kind of like a scenario where, and this is a conversation I've had with someone else, where this particular company negotiated with a caterer to bring in food every Friday for the employees. And they agreed on a price. The employee in charge of having that food brought in every Friday negotiated a separate deal with a friend who owned a caterer, went back to the boss, said, hey, we can do a very similar thing, but we can cut our costs by 25%. Unknown to the boss was that that employee cut a side deal with their friend caterer. And it was only by a mistake that they were able to discover it, some sort of receipt or something was delivered. I said, well, what'd you do? Fired that employee. Not because of the side deal that they cut, but because they pocketed the money and didn't report it to the company that was paying the catering bill. This is the same scenario. It is, are you okay with someone cutting a side deal from money you spend, or are you not? Misleading contract language, 2 examples here. MAC list, I've touched on those. Rebates, I'm going to run through these fairly quickly. PBMs, if they are engaged in information asymmetry, if they are engaged in hiding their management fees, they're going to have multiple MAC lists, one for you, one for the pharmacy. Some PBMs have upwards of 40 to 50 different MAC lists. Why? You know the answer. The employer's MAC list will be less comprehensive and less aggressive, meaning your prices will be higher and there won't be as many drugs on that MAC list compared to the pharmacies the PBMs have to reimburse. That creates the spread. Contract language, again, here's what I will say about contract language. First, it doesn't matter that you graduate from Harvard Law School cum laude. Doesn't matter. If you don't know pharmacy benefits, you could smoke the BAA all day long. The terms of service, smoke it. But when we talk about getting the radical transparency, it requires a trained eye within the space. Doesn't matter, 1600 SAT, doesn't matter. You must be trained in this space. Discount guarantees, rebate guarantees are meaningless unless the constituent elements are spelled out in the contract. To be able to determine that, you have to have a trained eye. Doesn't matter if you're SVP of HR. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long you've been a broker in this business, in employee benefits. If you haven't been trained, you'll pick up stuff along the way. And you know how the saying goes, I know just enough to be dangerous. It is dangerous. We don't need legislation. What we need is literacy around pharmacy benefits management. That's going to get the job done, right? So contract language, the sponsor impression is one rebate. There are multiple names for rebates. PBMs will make it look outstanding, and it will say administrative fees, price protection rebates, formulary rebates, market share rebates. These all go back to you, except for product discounts, except for clinical management programs, except for data fees. It's this. When we sit down with manufacturers say, here's how much money we're willing to refund, which is a rebate. Now, how do you want to allocate these funds? What buckets do you want to place these funds in? I sat at that table. On both sides. The data that you see here is public information that was released in, I think, 2019. So these transactions had taken place long before that, obviously. And then it wasn't until Express Scripts sued Kaleo, which is a specialty drug manufacturer, that it was made public. They sued Kaleo because Kaleo refused to pay rebates that I have no doubt in my mind they owe. Whenever someone sues a PBM because they found out they overpaid, my money's on the PBM. My money's on the PBM because I know about the constituent elements being spelled out. Anthem just, they got to dot the I's and cross the T's, but essentially the federal court said Anthem sued Express Scripts for $15 billion after Anthem sold its PBM in 2009 to Express Scripts, sold the PBM to Express Scripts only to still overpay and lost. Here are some more types of rebates as well. And so what I want to pinpoint here is that we talked about the formulary rebates. Remember in that pharmacy reimbursement distribution system where I said the first problem, the inflow of cash back to the third party payer, the PBM's client, was too low. The reason is because that particular line, that part of the process only stipulated formulary rebates, which is really, at the end of the day, what most PBM clients are getting back, unless they're extremely sophisticated and they have that trained eye. But what about the administrative fees? These administrative fees are different than the administrative fees I talked about at the very beginning. At the very beginning, I'm talking about electronic claims processing, 24/7 call center, account management, member web portal. That's what the admin fee I was referring to up front is. These administrative fees are manufacturer administrative fees. They're different. Price protection rebates, say if and the reason why Express Scripts sued Kaleo, say if a manufacturer increases the price of a product rapidly in a short period of time, then the rebate increases to coincide with the manufacturer's price increase. You'll see it referred to as an inflationary rebate or refund of some sort, but that's exactly what that is. Outcomes rebates. These have been going on for over 10 years, where manufacturers are offering refunds based upon an agreed upon metric or set of metrics for a specific drug. And if that drug doesn't hit that metric based upon a patient being administered and taking that drug, then the manufacturer pays a refund to the PBM. This has been going on for over a decade, and it's only still picking up steam because the software is caught up to be able to track it. And we talked about PBMs and the 50% of the profit that they make coming from manufacturers, and how through ballooning, once that revenue gets cut off, they move that revenue to another lever that they pull. Here's the latest lever: group purchasing organizations. So now, as rebate dollars are beginning to flow more back to the PBM's client, remember, PBMs negotiate, they siphon off those dollars and then pay back a portion of what they bring into the client. Again, my position is that all that money should go back, and then just say, hey, this is what I think our service is worth. But it's easier to overcharge when you don't put that number on the table. So what PBMs have done now, and even going offshore, is forming group purchasing organizations. Right? So, when I owned my mail order pharmacy, we were affiliated with a group purchasing organization. So we bundled our buying power with other entities, and that allowed us to bring product into our inventory at a lower cost than we would be able to go out and get individually. PBMs have taken that model, form GPOs now. And so now, instead of keeping rebates, which through education, their clients are beginning to recoup more of those dollars, we're going to charge GPO management fees or GMF fees, GPO management fees, right? We're going to charge GMFs. Same game, different name. So here's the bottom line, and hang in there with me, I'm wrapping up. I'm actually making pretty good time today. Here's the bottom line. I'm not saying the discounts of an AWP aren't important. I'm not suggesting that negotiating, big rebate, minimum rebate guarantees aren't important. What I am saying is that information symmetry is more important than all of them, like the state of Ohio, when they decided to start looking at how much money the PBM was putting in its bank account, only to uncover almost $250 million in spreads that those two PBMs were keeping for themselves. When they were able to uncover that, they decided that that amount of money was unreasonable. It wasn't fair. You must, and you or your clients must start evaluating what the PBM is putting in its bank account. And even if you don't have all the data, make some assumptions, because those discounts and guarantees and those claims repricings, PBMs know what you look for. They know you like the optics. They know you like the optics. The significance of the PBM's management fee is that, and this is, listen, I can't be mad at them. And I say that with a grin. The genius of the entire model is that the PBM's management fee is hidden in your final cost. It's hidden in your final cost. When you overpay here and you are underpaid here via rebates, that money flows into the PBM's bank account. It's a dead giveaway when the PBM's administrative fee is zilch or something artificially low, like a dollar per employee per month, $250 per employee. It's a dead giveaway. Don't believe me? Take the word from CVS's now retired a year ago CEO in an earnings call. When he said this, we underwrite contracts overall level of profitability and many levers available to pull depending on the preferences of the client. What he's really saying, folks, is we're going to make as much money as we can. The amount of money that we're going to make is ultimately going to depend upon the level of sophistication or unsophistication of our clients. The more sophisticated the client, the lower number of levers that these types of PBMs have to pull. The more PBM literate you are, levers are erased. And let's not forget the fire in the belly. The PBM's management fee. And this is what you do about it. If you don't have fire in the belly, you're going to leave here today and you're just going to fall right back into what you were doing before you got here. I don't want you to do that. Your employees don't want you to do that. The PBM's management fee, and we've created this in-house, earnings after cash disbursements. Everything in green lands in the PBM's bank account. You could also add in here, dispensing fees are part of the ingredient cost for the purposes of this illustration. Everything in green at some point lands in the PBM's bank account. In fact, I believe it's in 2024, I believe CMS has come out and said now that PBMs can no longer retroactively claw back these DIR fees. What that means for the commercial space, I got to do some more digging. My concern is that you're going to be left to fend for yourself, and the PBM is going to shift that lost revenue to your space, to our space. Everything in green at some point lands in the PBM's bank account. An example of money outflow from the PBM's bank account, share of rebate dollars or manufacturer revenue that is passed back. A reimbursement to a network pharmacy. That's an example of a cash disbursement. Whatever is left over is the PBM's management fee. I'm suggesting to you that the new path, the status quo, let's bury it. The new path says that the PBM makes money one way. That's the ideal scenario. It is contractually obligated itself. If any PBM that has been caught with its hand in the cookie jar, you can go out on Google, do some research. The first thing out of their mouths is, we weren't contractually obligated to contain costs. That's the first thing they will say. And they're right. With the fiduciary model, the PBM is contractually obligated to contain costs. Now, not every PBM is going to offer that. And some brokers, listen, you got to put cases at risk, and maybe you don't care what the cost is the PBM is charging. I get it. But if you do care and you got that fire in the belly, if the fiduciary standard isn't on the table, what is on the table is information symmetry. Even if that PBM is going to overcharge, at least know what they're keeping in the bank. At least know what they're keeping. That's the minimum. In 2022, transparency, that's what it's about. Going forward, 2022, transparency is what it's about. That's the starting point. And when I say transparency, I'm referring to radical transparency. So this is the ideal standard of care, but at a minimum, you've got to get radical transparency, which then allows you to be able to get the information that you need or your client needs to calculate how much money the PBM is making. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important metric that is going to determine whether or not a plan is paying fairly or they're overpaying. This is a client that we brought on in 2020. They're still a client to this day, and the numbers are consistent with what you see here, maybe a little bit lower, right in line, somewhere in there. The incumbent per member per month was $57.88. After the first year with us, $23.12. A difference, let's just keep it simple. Let's call it $35 PM difference. Prime Therapeutics gets better deals with manufacturers for rebates than we do. They get better deals with pharmacy networks than we do. Not significant to the sense where it's just like, oh my, no, it's not. Again, we're a part of a GPO and rebate aggregation, which gives us bigger buying power than we will have independently. So it allows us to compete. But more important than those types of arrangements is the PBM's business model. The earnings after cash disbursement, what the PBM was keeping in its bank account, the difference between 58 and 23, $35 PM is what Prime was paying itself. The worst part of it all is that $35 PM is higher than the ingredient costs. It is higher than what the drugs themselves cost. It was buried in the plan's final cost. I guarantee you, if plans and consultants and brokers knew that the PBMs were keeping more for themselves than what the drugs cost, they would fire them. Either change, you got to change something. If you don't, we're out of here. That is what I'm talking about. You mean to tell me we're paying you more than what the drugs cost? Yes, it happens. Way, way too much. And listen, I don't just because of our industry. Listen, if I say something, I back it up because you're going to second guess it, rightfully so. Listen, you're here today because you are aware of a problem that exists. Maybe your problem is you want a promotion. Maybe you want to break into the PBM industry. Or maybe your problem is you're fed up with PBMs and the opacity in which they operate. Maybe there's been a message from the CFO to HR, we got to fix this. We got a pricing problem and we need to do something about it because it's getting out of control. What can we do? But you're here because a problem exists. The next step is taking some sort of action around that awareness. And listen, I'm not going to pitch you here today. I'm lying. We've got the first education certification around pharmacy benefits that's ever been created. And we've been doing it now for 6 years. The reason we can do it is because we want you to be smarter purchasers. The reason we can do it is we've busted open the black box. We're bringing you inside because listen, for one, it's advantageous to our business model, but for two, the problem is PBM literacy. And we're trying to help solve it and have you pursue better opportunities, whether it's with us through this program or somewhere else. The point is, PBM literacy solves the PBM problem. That is what allows that fire in the belly to continue to burn. I'm a graduate of Michigan State's business school. It wasn't until some years later, after I left, that I finally decided. Our school was named after Eli Broad. He pronounces it Broad, not Broad. I said, who is this cat? Why is our school named after him? Read his autobiography. Lo and behold, he's the only living human to ever be a founder of not one, but 2 Fortune 500 companies. He dedicated his retirement and his money to improving healthcare through research. If he says education is the key, who am I to argue with him? And I'm wrapping up on this. I know zilch about automobiles. Other than when the gauge gets to E, I have to put gas in it. That's the extent of my knowledge of automobiles. And when I need to have an automobile repaired, I take it into the shop, and my main concern is I'm going to get taken. I know it because I lack the sophistication to have that conversation with the expert. So so compensating for my lack of sophistication, I shout, I bang my hand on the table. I don't need that. I need this. Inevitably, I make a mistake. I've got to either learn about it or bring someone in with me who's an expert in it, or find a reputable auto repairman. If I don't have one of those 3 things, I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing and just hope it all works out. I'd rather not rely on hope. And I'm asking you not to rely on hope. Get experts with you. Forget the titles. So-called experts aren't always experts in this space. I'm telling you, I've been teaching this for 6 years. I know it. That's my time today. If you have any questions, I'm going to stick around for a few seconds here. You will receive a recording of this webinar in your inbox in the morning. You'll be able to go back and review it. I appreciate your time. The next CPBS class starts June 2nd. The next one after that won't start, I don't think, until September. I think the first Thursday in September is when it will start. Appreciate the time today. Hope you got something from it.